Hi, everybody. My name is Sudhir Srinivasan, and this is my long review. In yet another episode of Long Review, I'm going to be talking about a film that a lot of us have been waiting for a long, long time now. We are going to speak about, of course, by now you know, Rishab Shetty's film, the second in the Kantara franchise. This film is called Kantara Chapter 1. So I'm going to be trying to capture the very many emotions that I experienced while I was watching the Kantara film. Some of it was positive and some of it not so much. And I think one of the earliest emotions I was experiencing while I was watching this, maybe 30-40% into the film, was one of a bit of impatience, probably, I think. And this is around the portion where Rishabh Shetty plays a character called Burmay. So when Burmay and friends get imprisoned by the royal family, there's a lot of attempt to create comedy, to create humor. There's a lot of attempt to, spend a bit of time, probably to fill up time within the film before it gets to places, before it gets to these experiences that it knows you will definitely enjoy. So even if the comedy was working for me here and there, the slapstick comedy, the stupidity of certain characters and how the film tries to derive comedy from it, including the Chenna character and a couple of others, I wondered whether it should be taking this long. I think part of the impatience was also because you know that Burmese and friends can exit this prison anytime they want. That they came to generally study, what's happening within the royal space, and once they have a sense of it, you really want them to get going and get started on whatever they're planning to, right? I remember feeling a similar sense of impatience maybe during parts of the second half as well, where especially during the war scenes, it's not that I was not enjoying the fighting. I was able to appreciate especially the handheld camera work, with which they capture a lot of chaos, and I enjoyed how the fights were being choreographed and what must have gone into choreographing such intense fighting as well. But there's only so many generic soldiers being taken down that I think you can see before you get a bit impatient. You do want more storytelling within the fights themselves, even though you do have imaginatively shot footage here and there. I remember there were parts of like, for example, Burma, because animals are so central to this film, and this film is a lot about how to exist organically within your ecosystem, harmoniously within your ecosystem. I thought the idea of capturing how the fights are all, I mean, Burmese almost becomes a creature during many of these fights, right? There are places where he becomes almost a crocodile, almost very reptilian in terms of how he climbs up a tree or carries a dead man on top of him as he's trying to maneuver himself to attack someone else. And I appreciated the nuances of what was being done to make these fights entertaining. But I'm saying that with the broad structure of storytelling, within the broad confines of storytelling, I did think that Kantara was probably being a bit too indulgent in these spaces. And in a sense, Kantara is about curbing excess. It's about learning to live within your means and not to be greedy for more. And that's the point of these films as well, in addition to the many other points that these films make, right? And I mean, it's about learning to eat on leaves, right? It's about, I mean, there are plenty of shots of Burmese tribal family eating in this film, and it's about learning to live harmoniously with animals. It's about rituals that reinforce the relationship between man and nature, and it's about all of this as well, right? Which is why you look at the villains, right? The royal family, and look at what how they are contrasted. They are contrasted with all the wealth that they have, all the materialistic pursuits that they have. Look at the number of people in their army. Look at all the jewelry on them. In this film, Gulshan Devaya plays a character called Kulasekara. He's a king, right? He's a very immature king who's prone to a lot of impulsive, horrible decisions, and he's a very immature king as well. And I absolutely loved his performance in this film, and I'll talk further about the detailing of this particular character. But you look at this king, even when he's out fighting with someone, he's constantly wearing his crown. And I thought that made for a striking visual as well, because this film is a lot about, hey, look at what these people value and look at what these people value. Which is why, for me, because this film is about learning to live without excesses, I did think that the film itself, rather ironically, was indulgent, was was sort of excessive with its use of scale. Having said that, I do think that he needs to be watchful. What do I mean by that? Because this might be a slippery slope as you make further, future films in this franchise. You might just be tempted by this pressure of having to deliver more and more and more with each film, in terms of, okay, now how do I give them the possession experience? Now what do I do with it? Of course, it could be a creative exercise. Of course, it could give rise to newer pleasures. But as long as, I think it's important to process it as our need for a similar experience and not the same experience. I think with that realization, a lot of the pressure might just be off this film, I think. Because for me, the beauty of the first film, and why we loved that end portion so much, was also how unexpected it was. And that unexpected nature of what hit us from out of nowhere, right? I think that's hard to recreate, and hence it's important to not address it in terms of, okay, how many forms of Guliga must I give you and how many versions of it must I give you. I think even once, if I get it and I get it authentically enough, that's powerful enough. Maybe because I saw another film yesterday, Dhanush's Idli Kada, I kept thinking about, hey, how much the royal family reminded me of the evil family in that film as well, and which I'm sure is a strange coincidence. In this film too, there is a helpless father, there is a sister, and it's about how these three try to band together, even though they have a lot of fundamental disagreements. And I think, for me at least, this family provided enough villains in this film, without the film necessarily needing another tribal group to be villains as well, I think. And for me, the whole dark magic angle of it, I wasn't really sure whether it was adding a lot of value to this film. Because it almost feels, at one point, with the dark magic and with the devotional angle in the film, it almost begins to feel like one of those Taki Amman films as well. I would have also liked for Kantara to linger on a lot of its moments. I got the feeling, especially in the first half, that it was in a state of manic hurry, moving from moment to moment. And I'm not just talking about the story of it. I'm talking about how the film has been edited. There is almost no space for us to process things that are happening, things that are being said. The dialogues are hitting us like bullets from a gun, and I remember, I mean, and there are many powerful dialogues in this film. And one of my most favorites in this film is one where Burme looks at the royal family and he's like, "Hey, so if you cross the border, that's authority, and if I cross the border, that is greed." What a wonderful line! What a powerful line! And I think if this film had stayed on its meaningful moments, I think that's the way to put it. I think if it stayed a bit longer on its meaningful moments, then the power of such dialogues and those moments would have registered far more powerfully than they do. And it's very ironical I say this, because it's also strangely languid with its comedy portions, right? Where it overstays its welcome, and you're like, yeah, can we get a move on? So I guess it's there's a strange dichotomy with respect to that, and I was also thinking about Bahubali at some point, mainly because I think Bahubali 2 gets into those spaces, right? With Satyaraj and Prabhas and them doing a lot of comedy before, we know the horrible things will happen, and before the twists and before the big epic war comes in. There's a lot of such experience in that film as well. But I do think Bahubali, being Bahubali, can get away with it because it's a different kind of film, and we don't hold it to the same kind of rules, I think. But Kantara, I think we love its integrity in a sense, and I do think that its purpose lies a lot within how contained the world is and how real the world feels, even though it's talking about all these supernatural experiences. So yes, I will definitely need to compliment the craft of the film while we are talking about all these choices, all these creative choices. I absolutely loved the score of the film, and I'm glad that two beautiful songs from the first film also find use in this film, and I'm so happy that they are utilized in full. It makes me so happy that those songs exist in this film as well. And I remember thinking Ajnesh's score was added a lot of value to this film. And I will remember one particular sequence especially, right, where Burmese and his family come with gifts and fruits and all of that just before the rituals are about to begin with the royal family. That whole portion, I think you must pay attention to the score and the experience that it gives us, the feeling it gives us about what's happening on screen. And while I'm talking about that sequence, I also loved how that sequence is shot. I remember loving how there's a sense of twilight about it, and the light falls so beautifully, so gently and gracefully on everybody's faces, and there's all this candlelight, and there is phenomenal aesthetic value in how this film has been made. I had watched the first Kantara film in Kannada because I generally prefer to watch films in their original language. And I would much rather read the subtitles to understand what's going on than lose the flavor, than lose the sound of what the language brings to a film. And I'm telling you this very specifically because a few minutes into Kantara, I realized how much I was enjoying listening to the Kannada language. I speak Tamil and Telugu, but I don't quite speak Kannada. But I think I was able to catch a lot of similar words, and my own familiarity with the language aside, I think the rawness of the Kannada language adds a lot of flavor to the Kantara films. The Kantara films, I see them as being very raw, in a sense, and very likably so. About 15-20 minutes into the film, I was just looking at somebody who was next to me, and I was telling them, I'm so glad I'm watching this film in the Kannada language, and I think it's a great marriage between the language and the kind of film Kantara is. Because for me, the pleasures of being in the Kantara universe come not necessarily from scale or the epicness of land and its visuals, but largely about it's about staying rooted to where you are. It's about accentuating a love for nature. It's about exploring power hierarchies within the human system. It's about trying to capture how we might be living in a limited parcel of land, but how important it is to make sure that both the land and the people who live on it are serving each other, right? And these are the ideas that make Kantara so valuable in my eyes. And I'll get to a few more examples of this. But for me, Kantara is folklore, right? And it's not really. I don't see it as history. For me, history is burdened almost by a lack of imagination. By definition, history is not that, right? But folklore, what it does, it gives you a lot of leeway to make up visuals in your mind, to imagine characters, to imagine people and emotions, and therein it is able to create a sense of awe, right? Which is why sometimes when we read books, and they seem so vast and fascinating and magical, and somewhere when they are turned into films, somehow we always feel like, okay, there's a certain character that it's lost, right? In this film, for example, a lot is being spoken about this character called the Brahma Rakshasa. And right at the very beginning, Burme, while he's walking with another character, introduces him to the idea of, hey, this is Brahma Rakshasa, and he eats people for a living, almost. And when in order to stop him from eating people alive, he needs to be given a task, and he says this story. And while I was listening to the story, I remember picturing Brahma Rakshasa and being very overawed by what this mythical living being must be like, right? And later on in this film, we do see this character come alive, and absolutely no disrespect to the VFX of this film, because I think it's phenomenal work, and I enjoyed the work put into it in order to make these creatures come alive. But when I did see this being come alive, the feeling I got was definitely not the same as the feeling I had while the story was being recounted. So, what all these slightly excessive fight sequences and the scale of it, or what the comedy that I was talking about, what they end up doing to this film is they end up adding a lot of flair. They end up adding a lot of flesh over the soul of this film. Soul of the Kantara world. Now, what is the soul of the Kantara world, you might ask? And I think the soul of it is contained in a few places, and I definitely want to talk about it. And for me, for all the Bahubali-esque war sequences, and I use that comparison only as a compliment to both that film and this film. For all those sequences, for all the epic warring visuals and fighting visuals, the moment that really stayed with me, the moment that made me most emotional, the moment that created the most awe within me, that moved me to tears almost, is a moment where creature and man come face to face. When this massive, beautiful tiger gets up close with Burmese character, his face, and man and creature are locked so close with eyes looking at each other, with almost a deep communication happening between them without words needing to be spoken. I definitely welled up looking at that scene, and the beauty of how you'd expect such creatures to be dangerous and to hurt you, but in this film, in this context, it serves as a protector. And this is as close to feeling devotional as somebody like me might come, I think. Be it that moment, or I think there's another moment that I can think of involving a creature. There are all these ape-like creatures in this film, evil monkeys, so to speak. So when this tiger comes to protect Burma, and it's hurting all these people, and it's almost very dangerously magnificent to behold while all of this is happening. Uh, they end up capturing a beautiful reaction on one of the monkey's faces, where the monkey looks confident one moment, but instantly shrivels in fear. And it's hard not to end up admiring the tiger on account of that reaction as well. And for me, it's in these little moments of reaction, these little moments of emotion that Kantara captures, where the soul of this film lies. And where else does the soul of the film lie? Of course, in Rishab Shetty's performance, and especially those bits where he plays a man possessed. And I remember, like it happened yesterday, what I felt, and how, the sense of awe that I felt when I was watching the final portions of the first film. And I'm sure a lot of you felt that as well. It felt like we were in the presence of something profound. We were in the presence of something beyond the average film experience, right? And that's what gets us to the second film as well. And Rishab Shetty strikes me as a very smart creator, and he knows that we're going to be coming to the theater with such expectations as well. And so does he deliver? Oh, absolutely, yeah. And he tries to give us a bit more than the first film, a lot more than the first film, by capturing the many forms of Guliga in this film, and when he starts playing up that performance, right, where he becomes almost like a creature, how his posture becomes very almost very non-human, and how he processes information without necessarily compromising character integrity. Like at the end of this film, towards the end of this film, when Rukmini's character looks at him and says, "Hey, do you want to take on a woman?" I loved how he processes that information and how he responds to her. And these are moments I absolutely love in this film. So does it work a second time around? Does the trick work again? Yes, it absolutely does, because Rishabh loses himself in those moments so powerfully, so effectively, that it's impossible not to be charmed by it. And I almost feel guilty, and this is again credit to his performance in these portions, that I almost feel guilty about saying that, pointing out any other portions of the film that don't work, because these portions absolutely work. Rishabh is clearly a talented filmmaker as well, because apart from his own impressive performance, for me, he managed to get another performance that I know it might be sinful to say it, but my most favorite performance of this film is not Rishabh's, but it is actually Gulshan Devaya's. I absolutely loved him as the immature King Kulasekara in this film, and what he does, what this film does, what Rishabh does with this character is so impressive on many counts. Chiefly, there is one where usually characters who provide us with a lot of silly humor, right? It's impossible to take their evilness or villainy seriously. But this film manages to do both, and that's a phenomenal achievement, if you ask me. Because on one level, you're looking at Kulasekara sort of coming drunk to the court and making a fool of himself, and he's almost like a Pulikesi Vadivelu, right? You're looking at him and you're thinking, yeah, well, I mean, so where is the big villain gonna come? But when this film actually manages to make a villain of him eventually, And those portions are menacing as well. And Gulshan's laughter there, his smile there, when people start praying to the deity, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm here. Worship me." It is both born out of immaturity, it is born out of stupidity, and it also almost makes the commentary that only that kind of immaturity and stupidity can result in such evil. And I really enjoyed that. And for me, one of my most favorite moments of Gulshan's performance in this film is that portion where Guliga possesses Burme, and Burme is dancing around, and he's already feeling it, right? And we're all feeling it. And the truth is, Kulashekara is also feeling it, but he's still reluctant to admit it. And this layer of, he knows it deep within, but he's not willing to admit it. Where Kulashekara looks at him and says, "What? This is another dance performance, and are we supposed to be impressed? And maybe we should all clap to this performance," while secretly being terrified. I thought that was a great nuance the performance brought out. So it is for such choices and the many other moments that I mentioned in this long review that I definitely see value in this film. So in terms of storytelling, is it all there? Is it all to be praised? I'm not really sure. But there is enough in it to make us feel excited about another film in this franchise for sure, I think. And I look forward to seeing how the talented Rishab Shetty manages expectations a third time around. And I certainly hope that he doesn't process these expectations as desiring only scale. And I certainly hope he's not burdened by the expectation to make these films more and more vaster in scale. Because for me, the true beauty of the Kantara world is in the smaller moments, and how it makes us realize that it's not about all the wealth that you accumulate. It is not about the grandest palace that you live in. That can give you joy. Sometimes, if you just sit under a tree with your family, eating food off a leaf, being in the presence of animals that you love and animals that love you, that experience is good enough, and that experience is probably the point of it all. And I doubt that such an authentic point can be made by a film burdened with expectations of scale and epic visual. So let's see what else this universe has in store. This is my long review of Kantara Chapter 1. Do feel free to share your thoughts on this film as well. Thank you for being patient and watching this long review of Kantara.